Right, so costume design. It's got to be one of the coolest fields out there, right?
No,
I mean, who wouldn't want to create amazing outfits for a living?
it definitely sounds glamorous,
Yeah.
but like any career, there's that reality behind the scenes stuff.
Exactly. And, that's what we're all about in these deep dives, giving you the real deal, no sugarcoating.
I'm with you. And costume design, it's no exception.
So today we've got a ton of great info from RoleCatcher. They've got this whole career guide for aspiring costume designers. Plus we'll look at how their AI tools can actually help you land a job. Oh, and they've even got some interview tips sprinkled in there.
Sounds like we've got all our bases covered, especially since it is a seriously competitive field.
No kidding. Okay, so RoleCatcher kicks things off by talking about the core of being a costume designer.
Mm.
And they really emphasize things like, developing a visual concept for the costumes, but also really thinking about the historical and cultural context. It's way more than just making things look pretty, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it this way. Let's say you're working on a film, something like Marie Antoinette, where those costumes, they weren't just beautiful, they were crazy detailed and historically accurate. Like, down to the stitching, reflecting how extravagant the French court was back then.
It's about transporting the audience.
Exactly.
One thing I've always gotten tripped up on is, what's the actual difference between a costume designer and a wardrobe stylist? The guide mentions it, but maybe you could, break it down for us.
For sure. Okay, so imagine you're working on a historical drama, right?
Okay.
The costume designer is the one who's doing all that deep research into the time period, right? They're designing outfits that not only fit the characters, but also fit the style of the era. And they're overseeing the whole creation process. A wardrobe stylist, on the other hand, they might come in later, maybe to work with an actor on what they'll wear for, like a press event or something.
So it's more about their current image and trends and stuff.
Exactly.
So the costume designer is setting the entire visual world.
Yeah, you got it.
And then the stylist is working within that.
Exactly. And that whole deep dive into history, that's something that, someone who wants to be a costume designer might not totally realize how important that is at first.
Speaking of things you might not realize right away, the guide mentions long and irregular hours. Is that a real thing or just one of those industry legends? Should I be ready to pull some all-nighters?
Well, picture this. It's Tech Week for a big Broadway show, okay?
Oh, here we go.
Actors are running around like crazy. They're focusing the lights, and all of a sudden, bam, a costume rips.
Oh, no.
A good costume designer, they're right there, needle and thread in hand, fixing it, even if it means they're up all night.
Okay, a rip in Tech Week. Yeah, that sounds pretty intense. But I could see how dedicated you got to be. The guide also mentioned some skills that you might not expect, like active listening. I mean, that's got to be important in any field, right?
Right.
But what does that actually look like for a costume designer?
It goes way beyond just hearing the words, It's about really understanding the subtext. Let's say a director wants a character to look powerful.
Right.
A good costume designer is not just going to throw a crown on them and call it a day. They're going to ask questions. What kind of power? Are we talking subtle, manipulative power that they earned by overcoming some crazy obstacles?
Okay, those are all going to look totally different.
Exactly. And all those little nuances, they all feed into the choices that the costume designer makes. Are they going to go with a really sharp tailored suit or maybe something more like a flowing ornate kind of robe? I mean, those two things tell very different stories.
Oh, for sure. So they're kind of translating between the director's vision and the language of fabric and silhouette.
Exactly. And then there's systems evaluation, which honestly sounds kind of like a technical term.
It does.
But it goes back to what we were talking about with that whole Tech Week scenario.
Right.
A costume has to work, actually function for whatever the actor's doing on stage or on screen.
Right. Oh, right. You can't have a costume with a million yards of fabric if they've got to be doing sword fighting or something.
Exactly. A good costume designer is thinking about all that stuff. How much can they move in this? Is it going to hold up? How's the fabric going to look under the stage lights?
Or on camera.
Yeah. I mean, think about the Lord of the Rings films.
Oh, yeah.
Those costumes were insane. But they weren't just visually epic. They were designed to withstand all this crazy stuff, harsh filming conditions, those big battle scenes.
That's amazing. So it's they're engineers on top of being artists.
Totally.
And, speaking of that whole practical side of things, the guide also mentions managing costume budgets.
Yeah.
Which honestly sounds kind of terrifying.
It definitely takes some, some serious number crunching. Imagine you're designing a period piece, right? Hundreds of extras. You've got to find the fabric, make sure it's affordable, maybe even repurpose some existing pieces, and it still has to be historically accurate. That's a lot. And this is where those like project management skills really come into play, which actually reminds me, we were talking about RoleCatcher's AI tools earlier.
Right. Their whole platform seems like it could be super helpful, especially if you're just starting out. Like,
Mhm.
I was super interested in that RoleCatcher.capture plugin. It's basically like having a personal assistant for your job hunt, right?
Totally. I mean, think about how many job boards and websites you'd have to go through otherwise.
So many. It's overwhelming.
It's a lot, and this plugin basically streamlines all of that for you. Organizes everything so you can focus on the important stuff, like writing a killer application.
No more having like a million tabs open. I love it.
Right.
But what about that AI recruiter feature? How does
What?
AI even, like, work with job applications?
Okay, so think of it like this. Imagine a human recruiter, but like a million times faster.
Okay.
RoleCatcher's AI looks at job descriptions, pulls out the keywords, the skills, all that good stuff. Then it compares those to your resume and highlights what makes you a good fit, maybe suggests some areas where you could, beef up your experience a little.
So it's kind of like having like a digital mentor in your corner,
Yeah.
helping you put your best foot forward. That's wild.
It's pretty amazing. And speaking of putting your best foot forward, let's talk about actually standing out, because this field is crazy competitive.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
So how do you break through the noise?
That's where having an amazing portfolio comes in. And I mean amazing. Rollcatcher's Guide, it's got this whole section about showcasing your capabilities, and they make a really good point, like a costume designer's portfolio can't just be some pretty sketches.
So are you saying it needs to show off those project management skills we were just talking about?
100%. Things like, did you work on a project where you had a super tight budget?
Yeah.
Include a breakdown of how you made it work. Or maybe you had a costume that had to be completely revamped at the last minute. Show the before and after.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. Basically, your portfolio is going to be like a visual representation of you as a problem solver.
So it's like you're saying, hey, I can totally nail this character's look, and I can do it on time and within budget.
Exactly. And beyond the whole portfolio thing, don't underestimate like good old-fashioned networking. Go to industry events, reach out to designers whose work you love, maybe try to set up an informational interview.
Those connections can be everything.
Yeah.
So we've covered a ton of ground here. The creative stuff, the business side of things, even how AI can, like, give you a boost in your job hunt.
Oh, yeah.
Any last words of wisdom for our listeners who are, like, ready to dive headfirst into the world of costume design?
You got to have passion, that's for sure. But remember, that's just the starting point. Never stop learning, whether it's like diving deeper into historical fashion or figuring out how to use the latest fabric technology.
Stay curious.
Totally. And don't shy away from those like less obvious skills, the active listening, the project management stuff. That's what's going to make you stand out from the crowd.
It's about being a well-rounded person, not just someone who's good at art.
Exactly. And never forget that your perspective, what you bring to the table, that's valuable. Like, what stories do you want to tell through your costumes? What mark are you going to make on the world of film or TV or theater?
Oh, chills. I love that. That's such a great point to end on. It's been so much fun diving into all this with you. And listener, as you start this incredible journey, just remember, your dream career is out there waiting for you to create it. Keep that passion alive. Keep learning. And hey, who knows? Maybe one day I'll be lucky enough to see your designs up on stage.